If you've made it past the first few hours in Sineus Arena Survivors, you know very well how fast things escalate. Surviving the initial wave seems easy enough, but when the screen fills up with enemies and the real pressure starts, just knowing the basics won't save you. I spent a good amount of time testing combinations in the arena, taking a lot of hits, and discovering mechanics that the game simply doesn't tell you right away. That's why today I've gathered 10 advanced tips that completely changed my matches, and if you apply them, I guarantee at least one tip will help you significantly. I'm Matthew, and let's get straight to the point. This was one of the first things I had to unlearn while playing Sineus Arena Survivors, getting too comfortable inside the base. At first, it feels safe, right? You build your defenses, protect yourself, and think everything is under control. But as the game progresses, this becomes a trap. The hordes begin to scale in such a way that if you stay trapped inside, you're basically waiting to be surrounded. What really started to change my runs was understanding the value of open space. Instead of concentrating everything at the base, I started scattering towers, especially around the outskirts. This creates a sort of containment zone that weakens enemies before they even get close to your walls. And this makes an absurd difference in the mid-game. Additionally, using the space outside the base for movement is essential. Kiting here is not optional, it's survival. When you move well and pull enemies through areas where your towers are hitting, you multiply your efficiency. You aren't just running away, you are controlling the flow of the horde. And this gives you much more time to react and avoid chaotic situations. If you insist on playing purely defensively, locked inside the base, the game will eventually punish you for it. In the late game, standing still is practically asking to lose. When I started playing more actively, balancing mobility with defense, the runs became much more consistent. You stop surviving by luck and start mastering the pace of the match. This one hurt to learn. In this game, leaving the safety of the base is incredibly tempting, especially when you realize that the best drops are right out there. And at the beginning, it always seems worth the risk until you die carrying a bunch of rare loot and watch everything get left behind. The game practically provokes you to be greedy. You see that better item, that stronger artifact, and you think just a little bit more. Except that just one more is exactly where many good runs end. Because unlike other survivors, there is no forgiveness here. If you die outside the base, you lose everything you were carrying at that moment. And the most interesting part is that this completely changes how you play. It's not just about getting stronger, it's about knowing when to retreat. Several of my runs improved significantly when I started playing with more discipline, going out to gather resources, but always with a clear escape route and without overextending the risk. There is a possibility of recovering loot with allies, but in practice, this becomes almost a suicide mission, depending on the situation. So for me, the turning point was to stop playing on impulse. Not all loot is worth the risk, and understanding this is what separates a consistent run from a frustrating defeat. If you play co-op, as if everyone is doing everything at the same time, the chances of things going wrong are enormous. I noticed this pretty quickly during my first runs with friends. Everyone would head out to explore, no one properly looked after the base, and when we came back, it was already too late. The game changes completely when you start dividing roles. It always works better when someone takes on the responsibility of keeping the base running, building, repairing, organizing defenses, while the others venture further away looking for better loot and resources. This creates a much more stable rhythm for the match. And the coolest part is that this gives each player an identity within the run. Those outside need to know how to manage on their own, kite well, and choose what is worth picking up. The one staying at the base needs to have situational awareness, know where to invest, and hold off the waves. When this coordination clicks, the game almost feels lighter, because everyone is fulfilling their role well. Now, when no one plans anything, it turns into chaos rapidly. Everyone gets overwhelmed, the base is abandoned, loot is lost. It's that classic domino effect. After I started playing with this clearer division of labor, the runs became much more consistent, and above all, much more fun. In my first few matches, I completely ignored XP buildings and focused only on raw damage or immediate defense. It worked for a while, but later on, I would always fall behind in power without understanding exactly why. When I started prioritizing constructions like the Carver's Guild right at the beginning, the difference was night and day. Faster experience gain accelerates everything. You unlock abilities sooner, strengthen your character earlier, and handle waves that would normally be problematic much better. It's that snowball effect that once it connects, completely changes the run. The most interesting part is that this doesn't seem very impactful in the first few minutes. You don't feel that immediate power spike like you do with other choices. However, as the game progresses, it becomes clear that you are always one step ahead. Where I used to struggle to survive, now I am already prepared for what comes next. Today, ignoring this type of construction in the early game simply makes no sense to me. If you want to scale well and have consistent runs, starting by investing in XP is one of the safest decisions you can make. It's the kind of silent advantage that carries the entire match without you even realizing it. This one is quite counterintuitive because our first reaction is always, the boss appeared, let's eliminate it as fast as possible. Except in Sineus Arena Survivors, doing this too early can literally end your run. It took me a while to realize that in this case, too much efficiency works against you. The point is that the boss functions almost as a trigger for chaos. If you take it down before you are truly prepared, the game accelerates to a level that your build cannot keep up with yet. And then comes that absurd swarm while you are still under construction, without enough damage, already synergies. When I started holding back a bit more, letting the timer run before finishing off the boss, everything changed. It allows you to farm more resources, fine-tune your build, strengthen defenses, and arrive much more prepared for the final phase. It's as if you are buying time to transform an okay run into a truly strong one. Of course, you can't stall for too long and lose control of the situation, but finding that balance is essential. Today, I treat the boss almost as a strategic tool, not just an objective. Knowing when to kill is just as important as being able to kill, and that makes all the difference in the final outcome of the run. This was one of the builds that surprised me the most when it actually started to click. In the beginning, I made the classic mistake of focusing only on raw damage with classes like the Berserker, thinking that hitting harder was enough. But in Sineus Arena Survivors, when the screen fills with enemies, it's not enough to just deal high damage to a few targets. You need consistency and sustain. That's when the synergy between projectile count, critical hits, and lifesteal started to shine for me. When you increase the number of projectiles, you basically multiply your chances of hitting. Couple that with a good critical hit rate, and suddenly you are dealing massive area of effect damage all the time. It's not just about strength, it's about volume. Now, what really transforms this combination into something absurd is lifesteal, because the more hits you land, the more you heal. And since you are hitting multiple enemies simultaneously, your health simply keeps rising, even in the middle of chaos. There were moments when I clearly should have died, but the build held up on its own purely through sustain. Once I understood this, the way I put builds together changed completely. Instead of thinking about isolated attributes, I started looking for synergies that amplify each other. And this one, especially against dense hordes, is one of the strongest in the game. When it clicks, you stop reacting to danger and start simply walking right through it. This one was a game changer for my runs, especially after I already understood the value of the Carver's Guild. Because it's no use gaining more XP and unlocking abilities fast if you can't properly utilize the artifacts that drop throughout the match. And that is exactly where the tavern comes in. At first, I completely underestimated this building. I would just take whatever artifacts came my way and move on without thinking much about optimization. But when I started using the tavern to re-roll and better organize what I was carrying, I realized how much potential I had been wasting in previous runs. The tavern basically gives you control. Instead of relying solely on luck, you begin shaping your build according to what actually works well together. You can look for specific synergies, stack important effects, and avoid getting stuck with mediocre artifacts that don't contribute to your playstyle. Today, after securing early XP gains, the tavern becomes an almost automatic priority for me, because it's what transforms an okay build into something truly powerful. When you start choosing your artifacts more carefully instead of just accepting anything, the game opens up much more, and your runs start becoming a lot more consistent. In Sineus Arena Survivors, one of the most dangerous things you can do is treat building as a separate moment from the action. I did this a lot in the beginning. I would clear a space, stop, build everything calmly, and inevitably end up getting pressured again without being ready. The game wasn't designed to give you that kind of break. Over time, I realized that building well here is almost an extension of combat. You need to keep moving the entire time, maintaining your kiting, while positioning your structures along the way. This completely changes how you play because that safe moment to set up your defense no longer exists. And when you start to master this, everything becomes more dynamic. Instead of reacting to danger, you shape the battlefield as it happens. You drop a tower in the right spot while pulling the horde, raise a palisade to control the flow of enemies, all while moving without breaking stride. It's difficult at first because it requires coordination and practice, but once it clicks, it becomes natural. And more than that, it becomes essential. Because in more advanced runs, stopping for even a few seconds can be enough to lose control. Here, building well isn't just strategy, it's execution. There comes a moment when everything starts to feel more controlled, and for me that happened when I stopped running from the horde and started guiding it. Instead of eliminating enemies in a scattered way, I began gathering as many as possible, creating a single stream of enemies behind me. From there, the game becomes almost like real-time strategic positioning. I keep moving around the map, keeping the enemies grouped up while leading them exactly where I want. Areas with more towers, well-placed barricades, and the highest concentration of damage. It's not just running in circles for the sake of it, it's actual herding. The result is that damage becomes much more efficient. Instead of multiple small fights happening simultaneously, you turn everything into a single point where your defenses work at maximum potential. And the larger the horde you can control, the more rewarding it gets. Today, playing without keeping this in mind makes everything harder than it needs to be. When you intentionally create these kill zones, the game begins to flow better, the waves become more predictable, and you gain a massive advantage without necessarily needing a perfect build. It's more about control than raw power. If there is one thing that makes a difference right at the start of a run, it's how you decide to use the first few minutes inside the base. I've lost several matches because I went out to explore too early thinking it would pay off in loot, but in practice, I was only putting myself at a disadvantage without realizing it. Today, I play quite differently. Before even thinking about going out, I practically prepare the ground. I invest in passive buildings, especially those that directly strengthen the character. The Temple Forge and upgrades of that nature have become priorities because they ensure that everything I do afterward is more efficient. The impact of this appears quickly. With bonuses to cooldown, critical hits, size, and regeneration, you start clearing waves with much more consistency. It's not just about surviving better, it's about playing with more breathing room, without that feeling of always being on the edge of failure with any mistake. And most importantly, this completely changes the encounter with the first boss. Instead of arriving unprepared and hoping for the best, you already step in with a solid foundation. For me, this simple adjustment transformed the start of the runs from something unstable into something much more controlled and reliable.